Welcome to the Meta Slayer Show. My name's Lawrence, and today we will be talking about 11th edition 40k. Is it on the horizon? And if so, will it change the way that we build lists? That's the topic of conversation today. With me today is Mr. Beard.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. And Mr. Meta Mike.
Hello there.
Glorious. So, first of all, let's establish the facts. Been playing 10th edition for 3 years now. People are rumouring that 11th edition's on the way. If it's a full reset, it might change things dramatically. If it's not, it might just be some tweaks. But things that they could certainly tweak and things that people have been talking about all of this edition are things like granularity of points and the way that armies are built. So if you're a newer player and haven't played some of the previous editions, you'll discover that older editions had very different ways of building these armies, right? So at the moment, what are the rules for building an army in 40k?
So currently, all you need is to pick your faction.
Okay.
You then pick a character for your faction and a warlord. And beyond that, you can just take whatever you want.
Okay.
I would argue that the out of those very small requirements, the Warlord one is entirely pointless.
That's literally what I was going to say.
It has no bearing on the game whatsoever.
Are you suggesting the Warlord doesn't do anything?
It doesn't do anything, and it's
What
such a
do you
shame.
mean? Why not? It's a Warlord.
But there's nothing outside of a couple of stratagems in a couple of codexes. It isn't referenced ever again.
No.
So considering how complicated 40k is, you could have added some things in, like slay the Warlord, maybe, or something.
Yeah.
But no, you just have this weird thing where you have to have a character.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I find it really, really weird. The Warlord keyword, literally in almost all circumstances does nothing.
I wouldn't mind if there was things that built into it.
Yeah, right.
But it's just sort of like, you have to choose a Warlord. What?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, why?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah, like literally why?
We didn't get to that.
Like there aren't even, I can't think of any enhancements in the game right now that are locked to a Warlord or, there are no mission secondaries. Perhaps, I mean, outside of campaigns, outside of narrative play, where I think there is a little bit more emphasis on a Warlord in some of the missions. There's in any standard match play mission, there is no slay the Warlord, which used to be an old objective where you'd actually get like 3 points for killing the Warlord, which is really cool. Now it does absolutely nothing. So, okay, that requirement aside, there are a couple of other requirements, like you can't take more than 3 of a data sheet, right?
Correct, yes. You can't
Outside.
If you're in 2,000 points, you can't take more than 3 of a data sheet. And there's also sort of faction keyword restrictions. Obviously, you can't take stuff from multiple codexes, with a few exceptions.
Yeah.
But beyond that, you're kind of free to take really whatever you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah, you are. It's a smorgasbord of glory. However, with Battle Line, you can take up to 6 of those.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can.
And there are some detachments in 40k which specifically give the Battle Line keyword to certain units. So all of a sudden you can take 6 of them. So I'm thinking in the Chaos Detachment, you can take the Traitor Guard, which are otherwise not a Battle Line unit, as Battle Line, so you could run them as your sort of troops, if you like.
Absolutely. I think this is actually something that GW hasn't done enough.
Right.
I think detachments is where, and we've seen this in the previous editions, you take a detachment, you have a certain theme to it, you unlock Battle Line, or as it used to be called, troops, which we'll come on to later, and you could take more of those specific units.
Yeah.
And in the detachments where they've done it, everybody that plays that faction and sees that detachment goes, yes, I can finally take my Outriders as Battle Line, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But I would also add again that Battle Line, another keyword, beyond the restriction, doesn't really do anything.
No, it doesn't even give you extra OC. There are previous editions where actually being a troop type made you better at holding objectives. They tend to give you a better OC characteristic baked in on those units these days, but that is not even a guarantee. It is another weird sort of keyword.
Then again, as the edition's gone on, there's certain units which are better at OC than Battle Line.
Right.
Yes.
Like the new Reavers, for instance.
Reavers,
Right.
yeah.
It's like, why am I even bothering to take any Battle
Right.
Line? And a lot of the time, in a lot of army building, for me certainly, I don't take a lot of Battle Line.
No.
Agreed.
No. And why is that? Why don't you take a lot of Battle Line?
Because generally speaking, they're one of the worst units, and there's better options.
Yeah, and I think this comes to the primary issue. We're living in a lawless world of how you build your army, and the only thing holding you back from taking essentially the most efficient thing and repeating it 3 times per efficient thing is your own sense of what an army should look like.
Right.
That's literally the only thing holding people back, right? Like we'll build armies that are very thematic, but that's because that's how we see Warhammer.
Right.
But unfortunately, when you take away the rules and you start making winning the more appetizing prospect for playing a game, people will take the most efficient stuff and spam it.
Right.
So I guess the question is, well, is that a good thing, giving people that freedom or not?
Here's the thing. If you've played previous editions of 40k, there were definitely styles of army that you would see, and you would always, I would argue, see people take, even if they were limited by unit choice, they would take the most efficient thing the maximum times that they could. But because there were caps previously in place, you didn't have things like perhaps 5 Rogel Dawns running around as prevalently, or whatever the hottest unit is at the time. That said, if some restrictions were to be put in place, is that even a good thing? Like, isn't it good that you can just take whatever you want? Like it is a free list building world, right?
So I'm going to tell you a little story. I played at a tournament once.
Oh.
And I played on one of the final, the tables. And what I had against me was a Black Templars army.
Okay.
Okay. Now they didn't have any unique Black Templars units per se, but what they did have was 3 Gladiator Reapers.
Okay.
Now in addition to this, they had 3 Black Templars Gladiator Reapers.
Oh.
Because there were no restrictions on that at the time. And for me, that's the epitome of, unfortunately, the competitive mindset when it comes to the lawless system.
Right.
So my hot take is actually that if you did bring in restrictions, you would only apply them to a matched or tournament style game.
Right.
Because I still want to use all my toys in every other game I play, but we kind of need to temper the ambitions, perhaps, of the more competitive players.
Okay, all right. So let's talk the restrictions then and how they used to do it, and then after that we can talk about what some of the other adjacent games currently do to fix this problem, if it even is a problem. So right, you've been playing 40k since 7th. Yeah. I think I started teaching you at the end of 6th, and then we started playing properly at 7th.
Right.
Both of those editions had Force org charts. What is a Force org chart, Joe?
So back then, you'd have to have a certain amount of slots filled to build your army.
Right.
So you'd have to have 3 troops choices, which used to be battle line, as a minimum, every army, every time.
Yeah.
And I used to hate it. Specifically with Adeptus Sororitas.
Yes.
You have to have 3 units of battle systems.
Yeah, and they weren't very good back then.
They were awful,
Yeah.
but I was forced to take them.
Yeah.
The Force organization chart.
right,
You're
yeah.
forced to.
Yeah, this is how an army is built, like in real life too, right?
But what I did quite like was taking like heavy support detachments, because like with my chaos I always wanted to take tanks and things like that. So I do whatever it is I needed to do to take heavy support detachment. I don't remember what that was now. What did you have to do to unlock it?
You had to.
points?
So in 8th edition, you'd spend command points.
That's it. Oh yeah, because you just have like 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just start with the 12, front loaded.
So you'd spend a certain amount of your list building currency to unlock detachments. So if you wanted to take more tanks, you were welcome to, but you had to do something to allow you to do that. So I think that did lead to probably more themed lists.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
But sometimes it was frustrating that you couldn't just sort of add in a couple of things here and there just to make it a bit easier. So I think the ease of building lists is certainly better now. But I think there was a certain artistry and finesse to doing lists back in the day.
Absolutely.
Because at that point, everything had a points cost associated to it as well. So to make like a really nice themed list where you weren't like 50 points short or something, it took a bit of head scratching, and it was really fun.
Yeah.
Like building lists was like a really fun part of the hobby for me.
It was like build a deck.
Yeah.
Like, but you're up with your army.
Definitely, and now it's just sort of like it's just a big soup. You just put everything in the blender and put it in your bowl.
Yeah. I actually really, there are elements of 10th edition list building which I love for that, because it is that if I really want to make this sort of style army, I don't need to worry about slotting into these like arbitrary slots and, try and figure out how can I unlock this unit so that it fits in with my theme or whatever. So that's a good thing. However, as you've just pointed out, you take your 6 Gladiator Reapers, there will always be in a free list building world the the ability to just go, well, I'll just take the best thing, and I can even take double of that best thing because this keyword's missing or whatever, and, and just absolutely abuse it. But what was interesting is the evolution of the force organization chart for me, because back in the day, you had a force org chart, which was your combined arms detachment, which is your 3 troops, your 1 HQ minimum. You could have up to 3 heavy support, which is usually your tanks and your big guns, 3 fast attack, bikes, Reavers, all this sort of stuff, 3 elites.
Yep.
And then you basically had a classic looking army, something which actually kind of thematically made sense, and that was your bog standard one. However, people started to get annoyed because when they were a Blood Angel player, or a White Scars player, they didn't necessarily want to field tactical Marines. They wanted to field either bikes or assault Marines. So then they came out with a Vanguard detachment. I think there's like an edition later. I think this might be 5th or 6th now. And that unlocked 6 fast attack slots, but you could only take 2 troop slots. And back in this edition, as I recall, forgive me if I'm wrong, only troops could score. So you still had things like Slayer Warlords, First Blood, all this sort of jazz. So you could still win, but the way that you won changed, which was actually really kind of cool. And then you would get assault Marines running across you at the battlefield. That would be like the main troop type of Blood Angels. And then they evolved it to what will give you command points. You can buy multiple detachments, because they were like, some people were like, well, I want to have a knight, they introduced knights. How do I introduce that? Well, you can spend 2 command points and have an auxiliary support choice, which could be a super heavy or whatever it might be. So they slowly but surely evolved this stacking set of deck building, if you like, into something which became, I thought, by the end of 8th edition, really quite cool. It was really quite cool. Yeah. And then they introduced, for the first time, the concept of like actual detachments which gave you rules. Skyhammer Annihilation Force, remember that? Gladius.
Formations.
Yes, formations, exactly. What was it? Was it the Gladius which gave you
so there was all of the Battle Demi Company?
Yes, that's right.
You could field up to 1,200 points of free Razorbacks and other transports. And unsurprisingly, that broke the game.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Well, the Decurion detachment gave it which was the Necron one, gave it a good run for its money. It was what a time to be alive. I did love the Skyhammer Annihilation Force though. Two assault squads, 2 Devastator squads. The assault squads deep struck in, Devastator squads came down in drop pods. Yeah. Absolutely amazing.
Very cool.
With grav cannons, no less. Yeah. Anyway, so look, they introduced lots of fun things, and then they decided actually, I think at some point, from a design point of view, they decided that restrictions were just obviously a bad thing. So they took it all away completely. And then with that, they evolved it to also removing the granularity of points. So your plasma pistol, you're taking your extra power fist, taking a banner to hit your 2,000 points on the nose was no longer a thing. Now, arguably, list building is now easier than ever, but from my point of view, is not as fun as it used to be, because part of the fun was spending hours usually on Battle Scribe back in the day before the 40k app, literally theory crafting your lists and choosing different styles of lists.
Want more Tabletop Tactics? Then get yourself an on-demand membership. You get at least 3 additional shows every single week, covering Warhammer 40,000, Warhammer the Old World, and much more. That's right, each month our members can enjoy 8 full battle reports, as well as our faction focus and codex reviews, get closer to the team with 4 exclusive talk shows, as well as full access to our thriving Discord server. Members can also benefit from a growing library of painting tutorials from our studio painter, and whilst you enjoy your hobby, you can binge our seasons of RPG content. Right now, new members can access all of this and hundreds more shows for an introductory price of just $4.99 a month or $49.99 for a full year. Join Tabletop Tactics On Demand today and become part of our community.
So, let's bring this back round to 11th edition. Given how list building's gone in 10th, how do you guys feel about it? Do you think that this is something which they would even think that they would want to address, that they'd want to change in 11th edition?
I think from a business standpoint for Games Workshop, they're not going to want to restrict how many things people can buy.
Yeah.
and they're certainly doing quite fine at the moment.
Do you think so?
So I think there's probably a mixture of like gameplay tweaking and business decisions being made. Right. And I think coming in with any like really heavy restrictions would be weird. Allow people to buy any models they want and use them in a game of 40k kind of makes sense to me. Yeah. I think people are I think people are wanting more from it. I think there's plenty of other games, including their own, which have a bit more of an in-depth list building mechanic to it. Yeah. And I feel like people that like to play games like to have sub games within them as well. And I personally, I'd like it if there was a bit more of a thought process in building the lists than there is at the moment. I don't necessarily want a forced organization chart back again, but I think like granular points would be cool. And we have seen it a little bit with Crucible of Champions, a little bit. Yeah. So some options have points costs allocated to them. Yeah. Probably not enough, because there are some things in that book which are need a little bit of a tweak. But it is nice to see that some of the better options you have to pay for, which is something that's been lacking, I think, because you just always choose the best thing rather than thinking about how to fit everything and what to sacrifice to make like the perfect list. So I'd like to see that come back, but I'd also like to see something other than this is your detachment, this is the rules, this is the stratagems. I'd like to see more tools to be able to forge like a themed army. Yeah. Because when they came out with the new detachments, it's no longer White Scars, it's no longer Raven Guard, it's whatever they're called. Just generic, this sounds like the right kind of thing, sort of thing. I'd like to be able to represent my army better in terms of the list building and the way the army is formed.
Yeah, so it sort of looks like how the theme feels in your head. So an army that sort of is forced to represent that, like a Raven Guard army that has to take a certain amount of things, or
I feel like there should be enough restrictions to allow it to at least represent that army. Yeah. With the scope of the IP of 40k and how much flavor there is everywhere, I'd love to see that a bit more in terms of like how I'm building that army.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, for me, I think that I don't need full granularity back in terms of points. I think, there is an absolute argument that, putting points on your plasma pistol, putting points on your standard bearer, often meant, and this was true back in previous editions, that those things wouldn't get taken. They look really cool though, and they're on the sprue, but because they cost an egregious amount of points or just too much and you just want to go raw efficiency, you'd end up not seeing those cool models. And actually I think that's a shame. So if you bake the cost of those things in for free, that's great. But you can't necessarily charge the same points for a Devastator squad with 4 heavy bolters versus 4 las cannons, right? I think that where there is a power difference, some sort of differentiation on the weapons needs to be made. But I would just do it that. So I'd bring back like maybe 50% granularity for like the big guns. Yeah. Like a Demolisher tank might be a bit more expensive than, another like a Rust variant, for example, or whatever the hottest weapon is, right? That would be a nice way to do it, but you don't charge them for the sponsored weapons maybe, or something else like that. Yeah. But in terms of the actual army building itself, if detachments truly rewarded, I mean, you could argue if you just write the detachments better, if they truly rewarded a certain type of playstyle, like in theory, Raven Guard does have its own detachment, right? In theory, Iron Hands has its own detachment, right? Yeah. But you often see a lot of people just default to Gladius, which then ends up becoming a bit of a problem because you've basically got the Space Marine armies just painted different colours, but they're all kind of using the same rules and have similar sorts of builds. That doesn't always happen, that's just an example. So if they detachment locked things, would that be a good thing?
I think there's definitely a route, and perhaps this is for another video, where the non-codex compliant chapters shouldn't have access to any of the codex compliant rules, beyond obviously the data sheets. And that would add a bit more uniqueness to some of these factions. Yeah. I think the issue we currently have is that if you want to play Raven Guard, the only thing special about Raven Guard is the characters. And then the only thing special about the detachment is you get a buff if the character you've taken is in your army. I think what there needs to happen is actually the faction keywords should have an overall rule that perhaps affects army list building, rather than giving you a powerful ability. If you take Raven Guard, for example, as your keyword, then you're locked to certain detachments, but all of your, I don't know, your Vanguard veterans get an extra attack on the charge, or you know, something like that. Or simply, you can take more Vanguard veterans.
Right.
Something that maybe doesn't affect the output, but does affect how you can build the army.
Yeah,
and then it gives you a bit more flavour. A bit like Heresy, actually, in a way. Like each of the legions has its own specialty and can dip into certain things. And adding a bit more of that flavour for 40k would be nice. But in the end, accessibility is king. And we can't argue with the fact that the lack of restrictions has grown the player base enormously in 10th edition. And I'm sure will continue to, depending on whether they put restrictions in for 11th as well.
Maybe we're thinking about this all wrong.
Go on.
Why are we restricting ourselves?
Yes.
We should be given rewards for doing certain things.
Right.
If you're running Raven Guard and you're running all jump packs and speeders and stuff, what are you getting for doing that?
Right.
Rather than taking things away.
Exactly.
You need to have a little pat on your head when you do the fluffy choice.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's I think this comes up more with Space Marines than anything else.
Yes, it does.
Because Space Marines are the most popular faction by a pretty long shot, unless you're a cool guy and you like chaos, because there's obviously secretly way more popular.
But they should have all of their own Legion detachments as well,
Well,
right?
they sort of do. They're doing it right with chaos.
Yeah.
I think with Space Marines, you probably do need to have like a Gladius type thing for like, if you can paint your Space Marines whatever color you want, but you have this set of rules for you to do that. If you do want to play White Scars or Raven Guard or Iron Hands, here's some stuff that you get for taking the obvious stuff. So if you're running like lots of vehicles and dreadnoughts and things for Iron Hands and like heavy troops and stuff, then you get a bonus for doing that. But it's kind of fit around those stylistic choices for the lists. If you're taking all bikes, which to be fair, if you're running all bikes and you're a White Scars player, you should be rewarded.
Yeah.
Because that army's gonna suck. Because everything's gonna look the same, because there's so little choice in terms of bikes and stuff at the moment. You should get some kind of reward for being able to take bikes and speeders and all that kind of stuff. So I think if it's presented that way, it would probably be more palatable than say you have to take these things.
Yeah,
otherwise you're not allowed. Or you can take these things. And you can have a treat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that is what they used to do in theory. 9th edition, you would take a detachment type and it would reward that play style, right? You know, so you would get those types of units would get better benefits, and I think it's always better to reward than take away.
Positive reinforcement.
Yeah, positive reinforcement.
You're doing
absolutely.
a great job. Yes. Wonderful list.
So okay, let's bring this down round to the adjacent games under the Games Workshop IP. So you mentioned Heresy there.
Yes.
So they used to have force organization charts, very classic sort of 7th edition style force organization charts in 2nd edition Heresy, but they've changed it now. So how's it working now?
So in Heresy, your command staff is what unlocks the units you can take.
Right.
And there is a core detachment that has certain avenues you can explore with how you want to build your army, whether that's you want to take a bunch of transports and a bunch of tactical marines. And there's the keyword line in Horus Heresy, and these are better at scoring the objective, etc., etc. You will probably want to be taking these.
Right.
However, if you want to just take anything you like, what you have to do now is you have to start looking at your command staff and either taking more or specific rankings of praetors, centurions, etc. And then once you take those, you can unlock different, basically detachments. So they're kind of like force orgs,
right?
But they depend on the characters that you take.
So like a tech marine could unlock certain.
Yeah, so you could now unlock a heavy armor. So if you want to take more dreadnoughts, you're going to take specific characters in a specific slot and choose the option to take a detachment and have a dreadnought. What's interesting though is that when you take a character, you can either choose for them to unlock a detachment, or you can choose for yourself to gain a buff on like a unit champion. So you can make a unit champion better in a unit that you've taken under the leadership of that commander. Yeah. It's a really, really interesting way of doing things.
Okay.
And I actually think that 40k could easily be applied to 40k. So if you take Sabodin Khan, because we're on the kind of White Scars hype, then he could unlock for you either maybe a souped up Outrider unit for free, because it's rewarding you for taking the Outrider unit, right, with that positive reinforcement. And maybe they've got advance and charge in any detachment, or some kind of thing going on, right? Or if you take a Tech Marine, you can now take an extra tank in your force, right?
Right.
So maybe at the initial stage, you are limited as it currently stands to, let's say, the old battalion detachment, if you remember what that is, where you've got 2 HQs, 3 troops, whatever. If you've got that, then taking a Tech Marine as your HQ choice, or your character, you now can take an additional tank. So you can take up to 4 tanks in that army.
It's pretty cool.
2 Tech Marines.
It makes things feel a bit more special as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like the characters bring more to the table than just, like an arbitrary buff in a unit. Because I feel like part of the thing with 10th edition is characters are quite sort of formulaic. You sort of see the same character copy paste and with the same enhancement. You could argue that was the same in previous editions. People would sort of tend towards the best enhancements or whatever. But I feel like characters very much are there to like buff the squads, because you often see like characters lose all of their rules the minute they're by themselves and dead. Forget how to be really cool. So I think it would be really cool, like seeing certain characters, like, taking a Tech Marine to unlock an extra heavy support or a specific unit type could be quite a cool way of doing it. Whether they do that in 11th edition, I'm not sure. I feel like Heresy is so far away from what 40k is now.
Yeah, I think players that want the granularity have naturally moved towards the game systems that have that more granularity and more time for the list building. Okay,
so let's talk about that then, because you've also got Old World. Now, Old World. Yeah. They do it how 2nd edition 40k used to be, which is all a percentage. It's a percentage of the army. Do you like how they build armies in Old World?
I love building lists in Old World.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
So why is that?
I don't think it's so much around like you have to take this many things. Yeah. But it definitely does reward you for taking certain things in a theme. So I was writing a Skaven list yesterday. Yeah. And you have to take, for each unit of plague monks, you have to have a plague priest to take them. Yeah. And when you could argue, well, that's the same in 40k to an extent, because if you're going to run a unit of possess, you're going to want to run a master possession. Right. But he just sort of feels like a sergeant. Yeah. How they used to be. Yeah. A plague priest sort of makes it, for some reason, when you do it that way, it feels like that they have to go together. Like they're meant to be together. Yeah. And then when you're going through and selecting your warlord, it does actually mean something. Yeah. Because that's where you can give all of your like magical weapons and banners and all that kind of stuff. And it does feel, he feels far more crucial to the game. Yeah. Because there are also things in the game which require you to deal with the warlord. Yeah. Or to have your warlord survive. Yeah. So everything feels important, everything feels cohesive, everything feels a lot more intentional with list building in Old World. And because you can also give things to, you could give a magical item to your little commands in your squad. They also feel important, rather than everything just being chaff. You do have chaff. So in my little squad of plague monks with their little stabby knives, my banner guy does something, and the musician does something, and the what's he called? A deacon. The deacon. You can give the deacon like a little grenade or something. Yeah. Because he's important.
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? They all feel like characters, don't they? Yeah. You can sort of build a story whilst making your list, and when you then deploy it on the tabletop, there's a lot more at stake because you've not just sort of gone like, I'll have that one and that one and that one. You're sort of going through Tesco Express and just filling your basket, or you're sort of going to the market and sort of being like, oh yes, I'll have one of these. Yeah. Well, it's come from the Shropshire. Yeah, it's very important. There's a lot more to it. Yeah, it's more of an experience, I think. Yeah, and I think that the restrictions, because I've built quite a few lists in the new Old World now. The restrictions work. They're subtle. You don't feel like you're immediately restricted with like an organization chart, as you've said, but having the percentages, like only 25% of your total army list can be rare units, so your hydras or your big giants or whatever it might be. So you end up filling that quite quickly. So you can't just take an army of oppression, which is quite good. But yeah, I feel the old world list building, it's got all of that granularity, it's got that charm. It does have restrictions, but they're subtle enough to not get in the way of you enjoying the building experience.
Absolutely, every army will feel themed.
Yeah,
you've got that. You have to spend the 500 on core units,
right?
But it's not like the core units are just intercessors.
Yeah,
there's like a whole swathe of different units you can spend that 500 points on.
Yeah,
so it doesn't feel like you're really that. Tax is the term we used to use for it, right? It's
yes.
the troop tax. So you don't feel taxed by having to take those units because you want to take them anyway.
Yeah.
You just can't take loads of the rare and the special units in your army.
Because they're rare and they're special.
Right.
Rare and special.
And I think that's a good thing, right?
Cool,
because otherwise it becomes, well, it's a bit like we discussed this in a previous episode, our Epic Heroes to Epic. Like if every single army has all of the special characters, and you see that at the table all the time, and even while that's really cool, and I don't want to stop people doing that, if you see it all the time, it ends up becoming weirdly not special, doesn't it? It becomes, well, I'm always fighting Gilliman, or I'm always fighting Titus, or I'm always,
You've got like the three of everything that's the best. Yeah. You're reducing the experience because you're just doing the same thing 3 times.
Right.
And 3 times and 3 times. Whereas in something like Old World, when you've got your funny little cannon thing in Empire.
Oh, the Hellblaster.
The Hellblaster. You're only going to have one Hellblaster, probably.
Yeah.
And that becomes its own little experience.
Right,
and like you're sort of then like sucked into that part of the board and you're sort of down there with the gunners.
Yeah.
But if you do that 3 times over and over again over like subsequent turns, it's like, it sort of loses its magic a bit.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's just copy and paste, isn't it?
I used a Grand Cannon recently for Cathay.
Yeah.
And in one turn it misfired and one of the crew got caught in it.
Glorious.
And the turn after it blew up. it was very, very amusing. But it's like I only have that one cannon and I've had that one experience with that one unit. And then the other artillery is a fire rocket thing, which is a completely different thing. So you really get to experience all of the different flavours of
memorable
of the
though,
rules.
isn't it? When these things happen.
Yeah.
So okay, one of the other crew, I think it was James, or it might have been Chef, suggested that for 40k, a really easy way of making your characters, your sergeants, feel like they're useful is that if the sergeant dies, the unit loses its data sheet.
That was my idea.
It was your idea. Sorry,
mine.
mate. Yeah,
I thought that was a great idea.
I think that's a really great little. It makes the sergeant not just the first guy that is removed.
He's always the
really
first guy to die.
I know.
Every time.
Like Havoc Squad, who goes first?
Every time. But he's like
my boy.
He's the coolest model ever. But he's always the first to go because he doesn't have a round cannon. It's like, but
yeah, and of course I get it, and that's what you're going to do in the game because it'd be silly not to. But at the same time, you want to give them some agency, right? These characters.
I think that because that's been a big complaint in 10th, isn't it? Like you've got your character as soon as your unit's dead, he forgets how to do his ability. Yeah. Whereas if you've got a sergeant that dies, then of course they're going to forget because you've got no one to lead them anymore.
Yeah, he's
they
the
become
one that's
shaken,
ordering them and giving them. It makes sense thematically and gameplay-wise as well. You'll probably get an addition of lots of snipers appearing, but I also feel like that makes the snipers really cool.
Yeah.
You have to deal with them. And the snipers should be cool, right? He's taken out the unit leader, he's lost his data sheet abilities. It becomes a different meta.
Currently, Precision can't even target a specific model. It
Right.
can only target characters.
Right. Well,
So you can't even shoot special weapons.
there you go.
But it would be cool to bring that back and actually maybe make snipers actually quite good.
Yeah.
I'd
I
love to
completely
see sergeants have like the character keyword.
Yeah, why not? Why not? They can
Because
do
then it just adds another layer of complexity to it.
Totally. I completely agree with that. So, okay, look, we've spoken Old World, we've spoken Heresy, and those are definitely like the granular games that Games Workshop are doing at the moment. We know that in previous editions of 40Ks, they've had a whole evolution of different force organization charts. Is there anything from Sigmar? Is there anything from any of the other systems that we're missing out on that can maybe, do you think that they might even introduce? Because you see Sigmar and 40K stuff sometimes is quite adjacent, right? If you're talking about the game systems that GW does.
Yeah, I actually really like the Sigmar system.
Tell us about it.
So how it works in Sigmar is you take a character, taking that character, you now, in a regiment, you can now take up to 3 units with that character. And depending on the character, it might restrict what you can actually take.
Right.
So if it's, I'll use the Iron Jaws for example, if it's a dude on a big pig, then you can obviously take more pigs.
Right.
Okay. If it's a dude on foot, not on a pig, then you can't take big pigs with them.
Okay.
Depending on their level of leadership. Right. If it's a named character, they can probably take whatever they want.
Yeah.
Okay. You can only have 5 of these regiments.
Okay.
You can have sort of sub-leader characters in with your other characters.
Okay.
So it does give you the option to have those more support style characters. But you'd essentially be limited to 5 characters, and each of those would have 3 units they can have in that regiment. And that's basically it.
So the characters do unlock units that you can take, effectively?
Yes.
So in a way, it's quite similar to Heresy, isn't it?
But it's not like restrictive on specific units.
Yeah, sure.
You just take 3 units.
Got it.
And then your general, get this, actually does something. So your general's regiment can take 4 units.
Okay.
So if you make, let's say, a tech marine your general, if we were applying this to 40k, you could take 4 vehicles, let's say. But if you took a veteran, like a captain, maybe you could take 4 sort of veteran-y units.
Okay.
And they'd have different things accessible to that character's regiment.
Okay. And do those regiments also get unique rules as well?
So the regiments themselves don't get unique rules,
okay.
But they do affect, and you could obviously give them unique rules, they do affect sort of like who goes first, the effect of the game, the battle round, taking battle tactics, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So you'll get a benefit if you have less regiments overall.
Right.
And you could play around with the benefit. Maybe you get more command points a turn if you only have 1 regiment. Because you need to spend your command points on the very few units you actually have.
Do you think that they'll do that in 40k though?
Yeah, because I suppose then you've got a method where characters then unlock units for all of their main game systems.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue, Heresy technically isn't one of their main game systems, but if you've got Sigmar and Heresy, I guess it would make sense for that to filter through to 40k as well. Again, it makes characters a bit more important.
Yeah,
I suppose.
That's true.
I do like the idea of a tech marine unlocking like extra dreadnoughts for something like Iron Hands.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that does sound quite cool.
It is, yeah.
When you say the if you take that thing where the character then unlocks some stuff and there's no rules that goes with it, my mind instantly goes to what? Why not?
Yeah.
So you could have like some extra stuff in there to then like help benefit that thing that you've just created. But yeah, I think that it's certainly possible.
Well, the tech marine could then effectively be the sergeant of these 3 dreadnoughts that you unlock.
Yeah,
I guess so.
And then if he dies, they lose a certain ability, right?
Or like that tech marine then becomes a forge master or something.
Right, exactly.
So like that gets elevated as well.
Yeah.
It all sounds quite fun and exciting.
Yeah.
What about Blood Bowl?
Blood Bowl. Well, so
how do they build armies?
Blood Bowl?
Well, here's your star player, aka the general. Well, folks, look. On that note, we have pretty much discussed all of the previous detachments that they used to do in 40k, what some of the other adjacent game systems do. But what do you guys think? Do you think that they would even change how they build armies in 11th edition, assuming that that's what they're going to do? Be a really interesting topic to discuss. I can't wait to see what the future brings. For now, we'll join you in the comments. Until next time, I've been Lawrence, he's been Beard, and he's been Meta Mike. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.